Chris. Radically inclusive, permanently curious, all doors open at once. I went to see him read a few times over the years following that reading. I went to his book party when American Music came out in 2007. I bought copies of it for friends when they visited New York, and I insisted they read it while they were staying with me. I turned to that book when I would get stuck on my own poems. That is what good poems do, I would think, and I would try to do something in the same spirit. Hard to pin down, half dark and half bright, and utterly, totally themselves. Chris's work rides a line between accessibility and difficulty that uses sound and meter to align the two. A risky stance in a critical environment that often wants poems to be either accessible or difficult. There's no disruption between the known and the unknown in Chris's poems. No mystery for mystery's sake, just songs of the lived and the intellectual life, stitched together with sensual experience and perforated with the slippery stuff of ethics. Few of his poems end with a quotable line. Instead, they end with a question, a suggestion, a direct look at the falseness of balance. The point is not where we get by the end of the poem. He's not here to soothe you into a comfy, beautiful truth. He's here to point out all the ways in which life is absolutely riveting, terrifying, every bit of it worthy of song. You could call Chris Martin a thrill-seeker of the ethical imagination. This is what leads him to the philosophies of Nietzsche and Maurice Merleau-Ponty, the poetry of Ted Berrigan and Damon Ward. Life, friends, is never boring, but to know this, all doors must be open at once. The world's furious sun flows through my costume, writes Ted Berrigan in the epigraph for American Music. Instability is necessary, writes Joan Jonas in an epigraph for Becoming Leather. One must be a sponge, but not the kind you buy in the corner store, the kind that grows on the floor of the ocean, saturated with the body of the sea, reaching out in all directions, very much alive. There is always a teetering happening in Chris's poems, an abbreviated breath, a staccato line, broken brilliantly into a strange set of parcels that allows the reader's imagination to fill in gaps that he then fills in himself, offering surprise after surprise. Here's an example from the second poem from The Small Dance, which is the second section of his new book, Becoming Weather. And it's worth noting that the section from which this poem was taken is going to be interpreted by 5 dancers at St. Mark's Poetry Project in conjunction with a reading by Matt Hart this Friday at 10 p.m. That's right?
Yeah.
I wake thinking, atrocious, atrocious, horses moving diagonal in the shadow of a plain. Now the tragedy is anatomical, except I'm no longer good at transducing tragedy. Instead, go hungry waiting for others in a country where only images like torsos arriving from the sea arrive and linger like the cat in the backyard, nursing alertly. The nursing cat in this poem is as striking as the horrible specter of the torso floating ashore. Good hangs long enough by itself to suggest a self-evaluation. This is the condition of the American poetic imagination contending with war. We wrestle with the ethics of where we turn our gaze. Violence is always happening just off screen, but our gaze is aimed in countless directions at once, with no one location being declared the victor. The goal of Chris's poem seems to be to magnify that complexity and infuse it with song, so that more and more and more of life may be sung, even the horrible, even the most mundane. I think this holds true for Ben Lerner and Jeffrey G. O'Brien's poems as well, and we are blessed to have with us tonight 3 poets who offer song as a kind of anti-palliative, song as a new kind of language, song as an opening device. Chris's 2 books both point to the same idea. To write poems that allow that openness to flower is to allow all possibilities to maintain their staggering potentiality. It takes an extraordinary amount of focus in order to avoid being completely overwhelmed by that idea. And Chris knows how to circumscribe his set of concerns in order to allow for that perforation to flower into a body of work that does justice to his concerns. Philosophy, film, phenomenology, dance, ethics, sensual experience, rhythm, ancient cultures, the poems of his peers. From these concerns, he has crafted entire ideologies, although he is not an ideologue. He is a perpetual student. He will always hear you out. He is, like the very best poets, a tremendous listener. Chris and I ran into each other a few years ago at an opening for Simon Evans, the artist who created the covers for both of his books. and began corresponding. He sent me a poem for his hymn series, written for me. I was at the time designing Werner Herzog's memoir, Conquest of the Useless, and Chris, being a diehard Herzog fan, wrote me a poem that invoked our correspondence about that director's strange affinities. So I suppose I have Werner Herzog to thank for what happened next. We both got single, we fell in love, and last month we were married at City Hall in downtown Brooklyn. It's been a long, amazing journey, but suffice it to say this reading series changed my life, and I can't think of a better way to celebrate that change than to welcome Chris Martin to Triptych Readings. He is an editor for Future Poem Books, winner of the Hayden Carruth Award, author of American Music, Becoming Weather, and the recent chapbook, How to Write a Mistakes Poem. Please help me welcome Chris Martin to Triptych Readings.